Hi, I'm Karen, and I'm a proud autism mom. When I first found out my kiddo had autism, I was so sad. See, my husband was a high school football star, and I was a cheerleader. And we always imagined our son being a jock just like my husband, and we were going to vicariously recapture our youth through our kid. And of course, we went into mourning over the son we imagined. Our precious boy would never grow up to be a pussy slayer like his dad was, so we had to mourn our future grandkids too. Now, of course, we know that autistic people can and do have sex, and even children. But the thought of disabled people breeding is just so icky. I felt so guilty too, because I had my son vaccinated. And even though the link between vaccines and autism has been thoroughly shattered, and the guy who said it in the first place had his medical license revoked, my kiddo's autistic symptoms became noticeable shortly after he was injected with those chemicals with the big, scary names that are just so unnatural. I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish. I'm going to have to ask my gardener what that means. Anyway, I know the implications that it's better for your child to die of smallpox than be autistic is grievously offensive both to autistic people and the survivors of deadly diseases. But in our defense, at least then it's over. Have I contemplated putting my autistic kid in the back seat of my car and driving us both into a river? Yes. Would I say that on national TV with my autistic kid in the room? Well, yeah, I probably would, but I probably shouldn't, because that might make me unsympathetic. And the one thing I desperately want is sympathy. Like I tell my fellow suburban housewives on book club night over shitty wine, it's just so hard being me. Sure, my friends call me a sympathy vampire, but the important part is that I'm a strong, brave woman fighting for my kid. More specifically, fighting for what I want for my kid. And what I want for my kid is to not act autistic in front of my bourgeois friends. So I subject my 5-year-old to 40 hours a week of applied behavior analysis therapy. Now, ABA therapy doesn't work, and 1 out of every 2 autistic children subjected to ABA therapy will develop diagnosable PTSD as adults. And the very concept of ABA therapy, that autistic kids are just vessels for bad behavior that need to be punished, is incredibly dehumanizing. But I'm paying $24,000 a year for a therapist to administer a treatment that has been condemned as animal abuse when applied to training dogs, so it's really just a sunk cost at this point. The fact that ABA therapy started life as a form of gay conversion therapy and that autistic people are more likely to be LGBT than any other demographic, well, that doesn't bother me in the least, because naturally, you see, we're huge homophobes too. Now, my kiddo has difficulty speaking, but the majority of autistic adults can speak and understand what my son is going through. They can tell me when my son is clearly in pain and why. A rational person would listen to what actually autistic people have to say, but I'm an autism mom. So I accuse them of high-functioning privilege and dismiss what they have to say, even when autistic adults work in STEM jobs and have actual relevant expertise, and will generally do everything in my power to diminish the voices of real people with autism. For starters, even though most adults on the spectrum prefer identity-first language, autistic person, I will insist on person-first language even in autistic spaces. Person with autism. You know, like person with cancer, or person with black. I use low functioning to refer to my own child rather than nonverbal. I act like neurodiversity and autistic self-advocacy are just fringe minorities. I use the puzzle piece symbol even though people with autism have explained to me why that's offensive, and I light it up blue even though it's rooted in the sexist notion that autism is a boy problem rather than the criminal underdiagnosis of girls. And of course, when they tell me their ABA survival horror stories, like having panic attacks at the thought of being seen having a hobby, I dismiss them with, "That's not my ABA." But there's always a place us autism moms can go when the world gets too sick of our ableist bullshit. Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks is just as into eugenics as I am. You just know I would have aborted my kiddo if I had had access to the prenatal screenings Autism Speaks is funding. And they validate my self-image as a brave mother fighting a horrible, devastating disease. This April, remember, Autism Awareness Month is really about me, the Autism Mom.